My wife needed emergency surgery. The fluorescent lights in the hospital hallway buzzed faintly. Sterile, cold air wrapped around me like a weight. Machines hummed in the distance, the faint beeping of monitors echoing through the empty corridors. My wife lay on the stretcher, pale and trembling, the Ford drip running steadily into her arm. Her breathing was shallow, labored, and every second mattered. The doctor approached, face serious, hands folded over a clipboard. His voice was calm but firm. "Without payment, we can't start." I nodded, swallowing hard. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I reached for my phone. My fingers shook not from fear, but from anticipation. One number. One call. The son who had always been there in name only. The son who now chose selfishness over family. "I'm not wasting my money on her," he said over the phone, voice sharp, dismissive, almost proud. His words were like a punch to my chest. The kind of words that cut deeper than steel. I didn't reply. I didn't yell. I exhaled slowly, letting the beeping of the monitors synchronize with my heartbeat. The hospital lights flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the floor, highlighting the urgency of the moment. I could feel the seconds stretching into minutes. My wife's grip on my hand was weak, but I felt her trust in me. Her eyes searched mine, silently begging for hope. And I had to provide it, in a way that would teach him a lesson he would never forget. The nurse glanced at me, her expression both concerned and professional. She had seen moments like this before, the tension, the despair, the unspoken dynamics between family members. But she didn't interfere. She understood that this was not just about money. It was about choices, responsibility, and consequences. Outside, rain streaked down the hospital windows, each droplet catching the pale light, turning the world outside into a blur of gray. The storm mirrored the tension inside, the emotional turbulence. The ticking clock counting down to what would come next. I waited, patiently, calmly, every second building suspense, every heartbeat heightening the drama. He didn't know it yet, but the moment he realized what he had ignored would crush him. Finally, I heard a soft knock on the hospital door. The doctor paused, then nodded to me, understanding without words. "Time is critical," he said quietly. "We need the payment now, or she can't be treated." I dialed the number again, this time letting it ring, letting him feel the weight of anticipation. Suspense is a teacher, and he needed to learn what selfishness and arrogance could bring. Minutes passed. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like a countdown. The monitors beeped steadily, a rhythm that felt like a clock ticking toward inevitable consequences. Then, his voice came through the phone. Confident, perhaps even smug, completely unaware of the storm about to break. "I told you, I'm not wasting my money," he said. I stayed calm. I didn't plead. I didn't beg. I simply reminded him of reality, letting the suspense build naturally. "You may not realize it yet," I said, voice low and steady. "But what you choose or refuse now will reach far beyond what you imagine." There was silence on the line. The kind of silence that presses against the chest. Heavy, almost tangible. He didn't know whether to argue, to hang up, or to hope it wasn't serious. The suspense was complete. The tension unbearable. I turned to my wife, squeezing her hand gently. She gave a faint, trusting smile. She didn't know the details of what I had done, but she felt the calm authority in my presence. She knew somehow that help was coming, and it would arrive in a way that would shift the balance. And then finally, I ended the call. Not angrily, not spitefully, simply with certainty. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, knowing that the next few hours would teach him a lesson far deeper than any words could. Outside, the storm intensified. The hospital lights flickered again, shadows stretching across the walls. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not from cruelty, but from justice. From balance. from the inevitability of consequences meeting choice, because in just a few hours, he would learn something far more important than money. Something that no phone call could explain, no excuse could erase, no arrogance could prevent. The suspense hung in the air. The thrill of consequences, the weight of choice, the lesson about selfishness, all waiting for the moment it would strike. And I knew, when it did, it would break him. The night dragged on, heavy and unrelenting. The rain outside pounded against the hospital windows, each droplet reflecting the pale fluorescent light, turning the world into a blur of streaked glass and shadows. Inside, the ICU was quiet, machines humming and beeping steadily, tracking every fragile heartbeat, every shallow breath of my wife. I sat in the chair beside her bed, hands clasped together, watching her chest rise and fall. She slept fitfully, unaware of the storm outside, and more importantly, the storm that her own husband's neglect was about to unleash. I picked up the phone again, scrolling through numbers. One call, one number, one chance to set things right, and one opportunity to teach my son a lesson he would never forget. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but anticipation. Minutes ticked by. The silence was almost unbearable. My wife shifted slightly, murmuring in her sleep. The nurse glanced over, her expression a mix of concern and understanding. She knew enough to stay silent. Some lessons can't be explained, they have to be experienced. Finally, I dialed. The ring echoed in the room like a countdown. Each tone pressed against me, pressing against the air like a weight. And then, his voice, casual, dismissive, arrogant. I told you. I'm not spending my money on her, he said. And I could almost feel the smugness radiating through the phone. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch, letting the suspense build. Every second of hesitation, every pause, was a lesson. He didn't realize it yet, but the weight of his choices was about to hit him harder than anything he had ever imagined. I think you're forgetting something, I said finally, voice low and deliberate. Something important. And when you remember, you'll understand why I didn't panic. Why I didn't beg. Why I didn't ask more than I had to. He laughed nervously, trying to maintain control. What are you talking about? Dad, stop being dramatic. I leaned back slightly, letting the subtle tension of my calmness do its work. Dramatic? No, precise, calculated. You see, sometimes when people ignore responsibility, when they place selfishness above care, the universe has a way of delivering the lesson they need, whether they're ready or not. His laugh faltered. He hadn't expected this tone. He hadn't expected the authority, the control, the calm certainty that came through even over a phone line. Suspense was a teacher, and it was finally starting to work. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. The city lights reflected on wet streets, casting eerie shadows into his apartment. I imagined him pacing, heart racing, thinking he could find an excuse, a loophole, a way out. But there was none. The lesson was inescapable. I watched my wife, weak but trusting, sleeping through the storm. Every shallow breath, every pulse, was a reminder that life waits for no one, that choices have weight, that consequences are inevitable. The night seemed endless. Every beep, every soft shuffle of the nurse outside, every flicker of the fluorescent light heightened the suspense. And I knew, soon, the consequence of his arrogance would arrive in a way he would not anticipate. Then, in the small hours of the morning, the phone vibrated again. I could imagine him picking it up with curiosity, suspicion, dread building in his chest. The suspense had reached its peak. The reality of his neglect, the arrogance that led to this moment, was about to hit. I didn't answer immediately. I let him wonder. I let him feel the fear, the uncertainty, the thrill of knowing that something important was unfolding, something beyond money, something beyond words, something that would change his life forever. He glanced at his girlfriend, maybe seeking reassurance, maybe hoping someone could shield him from the impact. But no one could. Not her, not anyone. He had ignored the stakes for too long. Now the universe was preparing to make them clear. The rain stopped entirely. Outside, puddles reflected the dim morning light, cold and merciless. Inside, the tension built. Every heartbeat, every shallow breath, every nervous twitch of his fingers gripping the phone amplified the suspense. Then, a notification appeared. The kind you cannot ignore. The kind that shatters arrogance, exposes selfishness, and teaches lessons that words cannot convey. I watched him through the distance of imagination, absorbing the shock that was coming. And I knew that, in minutes, he would realize what he had lost. Not money. Not comfort. Something far more precious. Something he had taken for granted his entire life. The suspense tightened, wrapping around him like a vice. The thrill of inevitable consequence. The power of a lesson delivered without anger, without drama, without unnecessary words. It was all coming together now, and in that quiet, tense morning, I waited, patiently, calmly, confident that the impact, when it arrived, would break him in ways no apology could fix, because life, in its relentless way, ensures that selfishness, arrogance, and neglect carry a price. And he was about to pay it in full. The morning light crept through the blinds, cutting streaks across the hospital room. My wife slept quietly, 4 lines humming in rhythm with the monitors, her breathing steadier but still fragile. Outside, the city was waking up. Unaware of the storm unfolding within these walls, I picked up my phone and glanced at the screen. The message had been delivered. The suspense had been set into motion. I didn't need to call again. The moment of reckoning was inevitable. I imagined him pacing in his apartment, phone clutched tightly, each step uncertain. His girlfriend hovered nearby, trying to read his expression, trying to anticipate what had happened, but she could feel only tension, fear, and uncertainty radiating off him. The suspense had a tangible weight, pressing against his chest with every heartbeat. He reread the notification, confusion etching deeper lines into his face. He tried to rationalize, to think it was a mistake, to find some loophole in the situation. But reality doesn't bend for arrogance. Reality doesn't forgive selfishness. And the truth he had ignored for hours was now unavoidable. I leaned back slightly, eyes calm, watching the scene unfold in my mind. Every twitch of his shoulders, every bite of his lip, every tremor of his hands told me he was finally understanding the cost of his choices. The rain had stopped entirely. But the shadows in his apartment were long and distorted, mirroring the internal chaos. I could almost see him trembling as the realization sank in. He had chosen convenience, arrogance, and selfishness over life. And now, life had arrived to deliver the consequence. His girlfriend stepped closer, voice trembling. What happened?" she asked softly, her tone a mix of worry and dread. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes darted across the room, as if searching for a solution that didn't exist. The suspense was complete. The thrill of inevitable reckoning, of consequence delivered precisely when it cannot be avoided, had gripped him fully. I imagined him collapsing onto the couch, phone slipping from his fingers. His breathing was shallow, rapid, panicked. The realization had stripped him of composure. He was exposed, unarmed, and powerless before the truth. The hospital lights flickered again, casting sharp lines across my wife's face, her trust in me palpable even in sleep. I tightened my grip on her hand, silently assuring her, silently commanding the situation. Calmness in the midst of chaos is a force stronger than anger, stronger than shouting, stronger than pleading. I let him stew in the suspense. Let him taste the panic, the shock, the thrill of helplessness. Every second he spent unraveling, every tremor of fear, every pang of guilt, was part of the lesson he had refused to learn for years. Outside, the city awoke fully. Cars splashed through puddles, people moved on with their lives. But he was trapped in a bubble of tension, suspense, and imminent realization. Nothing could reach him except the truth he had ignored. I imagined him trying to speak to his girlfriend, his voice faltering. I don't. She tried to intervene, reaching for the phone, trying to comfort him. But the suspense held him in place. The thriller of consequences, the action of realization, the inevitability of justice, it all kept him frozen. Fully immersed in the lesson, I leaned back in my chair slightly, feeling the calm authority of someone who has orchestrated the moment perfectly. Every second, every heartbeat, every tremor of anticipation was a demonstration of power without cruelty. The suspense was the punishment. The thrill of helplessness the teacher dot. And then, in that fragile quiet, I imagined the moment he would finally understand the magnitude of what he had ignored. His arrogance, his selfishness, his dismissive attitude, every one of them had led to this. The suspense, the thrill, the heartbreak of realization, all would converge in the revelation he was about to receive. Because sometimes, life doesn't need your words. Sometimes it doesn't need your anger. It simply delivers. And in that delivery, in that unstoppable force, he would learn what it truly meant to ignore family, to ignore love, to ignore responsibility. And when he did, the impact would be complete. Not just shocking, not just humbling, but permanent. The thrill of suspense, the weight of consequence, and the power of moral justice all converged in a single moment. And he was helpless before it. The room was still except for the soft hum of the monitors and the faint buzz of the phone, vibrating in his hand. Every second, every pause, every shadow and reflection built the suspense higher, until finally, the revelation would hit him, and I knew, without a doubt, that he would never forget it. Morning broke slowly, pale sunlight filtering through the hospital blinds. The room was quiet except for the gentle hum of the monitors and the soft beeping of the Ford drip. My wife lay sleeping peacefully, fragile but stable. Unaware of the storm that had passed outside her consciousness and the one that would soon strike her son, I picked up my phone, glancing at the screen one last time. The message I had sent hours ago had reached him. The suspense had been building all night, each moment heightening the tension, each second sharpening the thrill of consequence. He had ignored me, dismissed responsibility, and chosen selfishness over love. Now the moment had arrived when reality would land where words could never reach. I could see him clearly in my mind, slumped on the couch in his apartment, phone trembling in his hands. The news had arrived unexpected, unstoppable, irreversible. His face had gone pale. His lips quivered. His eyes widened in shock as the truth of his neglect finally struck. He tried to speak, stammering, voice breaking. I didn't know. I thought I didn't interrupt. I let the silence stretch. Silence is the heaviest punishment. Silence is the teacher that words can never replace. Outside, the rain had ceased, leaving puddles that reflected the early morning light. Shadows stretched across the streets, mirroring the shadows of realization creeping across his soul. He had prioritized convenience, arrogance, and selfishness over life itself. And now he would pay the price. The girlfriend, standing nearby, could only watch. Her face was pale, hands frozen at her sides, unsure how to intervene. The suspense held him in place. He was trapped, forced to confront the consequences of his choices without escape, without excuses, without relief. The message notification blinked again. He read it, comprehension dawning slowly, terrifyingly. He understood finally what he had ignored for so long, what he had rejected, what he had chosen to dismiss. His mind raced. He searched for an answer, but there was none. The lesson was complete. I leaned back slightly in the chair beside my wife's bed, calm, observing, letting the scene play out. The thrill of suspense had done its work. The weight of consequence had landed perfectly. Arrogance, selfishness, and negligence had been met with reality, And the impact was devastating. Tears rolled down his cheeks. His hands trembled, clutching the phone as if holding it tighter could somehow reverse the inevitable. But nothing could. He had lost something far more precious than money, far more vital than convenience. He had lost innocence, certainty, and the illusion that life bends to arrogance. I should have come, he whispered brokenly, voice barely audible. I should have been here. I placed my hand gently on his shoulder figuratively, across the distance separating us, and spoke calmly, firmly, without anger. It's not just about what you should have done. It's about understanding the consequences of every choice you make. Love, respect, family, they are not unlimited. You have to honor them, or life will show you why. The girlfriend remained frozen, watching the emotional collapse. She understood, in fragments, that the lesson was larger than money or hospital visits. It was a lesson about character, morality, and the weight of selfishness. He fell silent, head bowed, shoulders shaking. Each breath he took was heavy with regret, every tremor a testament to the lesson he could no longer escape. The suspense, the tension, the thrill of realization, all of it had led to this breaking point. I watched quietly, feeling neither triumph nor anger, only certainty. The lesson had been delivered with precision. The suspense, the delayed consequence, the tension, all orchestrated perfectly by calm patience and moral clarity. And then, finally, I spoke softly. Remember this always. Choices matter. Moments matter. Every time you ignore love, every time you put selfishness above care, you risk more than you think. And sometimes, the cost is irreversible. He didn't reply. He could only absorb it. The reality had hit him fully. The suspense had peaked. The thrill of the lesson complete. The moral, undeniable. I turned to my wife, squeezing her hand gently. She smiled faintly, eyes trusting. Calm authority had preserved what arrogance almost destroyed. Life had balanced itself. Justice had arrived not with force, but with inevitability. The sun remained frozen, broken but awake to the truth. The weight of his choices had finally landed. The suspense, the emotional intensity, the thrill of consequence, all had created a lesson he would carry forever. And as I watched him, I realized something profound. Sometimes, silence and patience are louder than anger, stronger than threats, and more permanent than punishment. Life teaches lessons in its own way, and he had just learned the hardest one.